Hello. I'm I'm near the water of Leith, and it's a beautiful morning. And I decided to vlog again because there's been something on my mind which um, I just wanted to put it out. And that's what exactly have I been doing for the past 6 or 8 months in Edinburgh. Because clearly some people haven't been seeing an outward progress for my business, and I've also kind of become like a recluse, and so yesterday I met up with Daniel, and both the Daniels, and both of them were like, what's going on. um, and and the simplest way I have to explain it is that like growing up throughout our growing up, when we go to school, we we go to school on the premise that we are too young to think for ourselves, and um, we really don't understand how the world works, and so it would be best if we just kept quiet and learned from our teachers regarding certain subjects, certain ideas of the world, learn from our parents, and so on. And so that brings us to college, where that's sort of like even continued, where you basically learn from what's being told, and then anytime you're stuck, you try to search for an answer, you try to ask people who are ahead of you, and you search for teachers, you search for mentors, and that's how we learn. We learn from that point in which we build from what's being taught to us. We search for answers, we search for a textbook, uh, but I feel what I'm doing is requires me to go a bit tangential from that kind of prescriptive system of thinking. And some might say, what else does what else might exist apart from that? And well, I mean, if you think about it, if you're trying to do something quite original, it's quite likely that you're going to shatter convention and go against a lot of what has been taught to you. And some people can do this as an act of rebellion because they just feel inadequate or incompetent against the metrics with which they are judged. And usually, if you go down that route, you're gonna be bound to fail, because these rules and metrics are coming from a lot of trial and error and a lot of wisdom which has been gathered over the generations. And so the only point in which you can justify going tangential and doing something original and different is when that's sort of in a sense better than the establishment or what the norm is currently. And that is a hard thing to do, which is why outliers and exceptional people are quite rare. Because to go tangential and do something completely original, with respect to the previous context, in a matter which is like better than the norm, well, that's bloody hard. And that requires a sort of soul searching and a sort of like kind of taking away of certain mental processes and certain ways of thinking, which is what I've been doing for the past few months. It's almost like I've been de-educating myself from the set thought processes which have been put into me. A good way to sort of observe this is that a lot of times whenever I am looking around towards my immediate peers and sort of seeing the people who are starting companies around me, I kind of see that it's quite easy to actually take the way of thinking which you were taught in university and then bring that into the real world when you're starting a business. And the same way you sort of like try to search for a set establishment or a standard or a proven metric, and then you sort of just learn that and try to do better in the domain of operation for that proved metric. Whenever someone comes out and they think of starting a company, usually they're going to see a rising trend or a hype or something which is kind of proven, and then they would innovate along those lines. For example, like an app to clean your flat, or a blockchain which allows you to, I don't know, distribute music securely. So these are basically innovations along proven metrics. it's very less likely that someone would actually graduate from university and come up with the idea of blockchain itself and have that succeed, or come up and come up with the idea of app and then have that succeed. So that's extremely rare, and that's the kind of business which I am trying to start. And so obviously the preparation for that would be something which would be impossible for me to learn through any university or any course online, because it's moving in uncharted territory and then leaving a trail. And that's what I think I've been doing for the past few months, is de-educating myself to re-educate myself for the kind of work which I've been doing, and I feel I'm quite successful in that. I've reached a point right now where I have a lot of clarity regarding how the core technology would function, how the business would be constructed. So it's like it's going to be the company with the highest revenue per employee ratio on the planet, and so it's going to be so highly leveraged. I mean, not leveraged in terms of debt, but leveraged in terms of productivity, and you could say highly efficient. And there's also like a new hiring process which I've been thinking about recently regarding so finding people along the lines of my theory. That's another thing which I'm beginning to see more clearly when it comes to forming a team, and the whole idea of wealth creation, is that the creation of wealth is quite a violent process. I mean, if you look at the food which you ate today, certain plants and animals had to be killed to produce that food on your plate. And so it's not all rainbows and sunshine. And the violence becomes more subtle when you're thinking about starting a company or creating a new product, because then it doesn't come at the cost of murdering plants and animals, but it comes at the cost of silencing the voices of a lot of people. And so you kind of have the individual agency which wants to go in their own direction, wants to explore their own interests. See, every person has an ego of their own, and live in a worldview which is of their own construction. And when you're sort of creating wealth, or when you're sort of creating structures or anything which is like an establishment or society, you're sort of telling them to sort of move their way of thinking in a certain direction for a greater good or more benefit to their own individual agency. And when you're doing that, then the people who would benefit from that compliance would eventually be the ones who would uplift you, and that's what it would mean to be successful. But at the cost of doing so, there are many other people who want to flow in a different direction, and they would be forced to flow in another direction because of FOMO, and that's going to leave a lot of loose ends, and so that's also going to be a form of violence which you'll have to deal with, because it comes at the cost of silencing other opinions. And when you're working in a group and when you're working in a team, people want to flow in certain directions, but if you need to ensure that you have an idea meritocracy where the best ideas win, and then you sort of have this consensus in which you bend your own perspective to move in certain directions. And so this makes it so important to sort of find the right people when you're starting a company, because that's the premise which you set, and that's what eventually compounds over time as more and more people join in and try to flow in that same direction of thought. And the hiring process for that is something novel which I've been working on right now, and yeah, that's about it. And I think I'll end this vlog here, and I'll see you in the next one.